2, 1. All right, guys, welcome on in to another episode of On Beat Off Script. It is Saturday, April 12th. We're hanging out. I know I already mentioned this on the Track Attack, which hasn't come out yet, but it's also Brennan Urie's birthday, so that's cool. If you want to hear more about it, we'll talk about it on Wednesday when that part of the recording tracks. It's really tough to make sure that everybody keeps up with exactly where things are, but regardless, my name is Brandito, and I am joined by Mel. And Bob having other commitments today because he doesn't want to just talk about music on a Saturday, which is ridiculous to me. I don't understand who would do things on a Saturday other than talk about music. We have Rose. Rose, welcome on in.
Hi.
How are you doing, friend? Tell us about you. What do you do? Because, again, you're going to talk about it again in a couple of days twice, to the listeners out there in the world. But we want to hear about it now. What's going on? What gives you the audacity to be able to talk about music the way that we do?
I paid way too much money to go to music school, and I'm now a professional musician, gigging and doing things on my never-ending list of things that I'm involved in. So if you think I paid way too much money and should get a refund, let me know. Hit us up in the comments. I need proof to get it back then.
We're going to dive into the first album, which is DOGGOD by LA Witch. And if you don't know who LA Witch is, guess what? Neither did most of us kind of diving into this. But I just saw all-female garage group and thought, hey, let's give it a swing. I don't think we've covered really a garage band at all so far. So I was excited to actually get into a little bit more garage. I kind of expected a little bit heavier, but we'll go into the details about all of that. If you don't know, again, who LA Witch is, they're an all-female garage band that started in 2011 after vocalist and guitarist Sade Sanchez's boyfriend at the time had told her that she wasn't allowed to work with any male artists, actually, funny enough. So she decided, along with Rita Pie, to join together and create the band LA Witch. So it was kind of just a thing that happened. The reason it's an all-female group was because of Sade Sanchez's ex-boyfriend.
Wait, that actually,
whoa.
I feel like that makes this album make so much more sense.
Yeah, suddenly there's a lot of context that I think I was missing.
Yeah. Okay.
For sure. So, and they formed in 2011. They actually toured and just kind of did live gigs for the most part. They didn't debut an album until 6 years later in 2017 with their self-titled debut album. They then dropped another one in 2020 called Play With Fire, and that was their first album since before COVID. Or sorry, this is their first album since before COVID when that kind of popped up. There's sort of an amalgamation of kind of like this punky psych blues kind of style that's become their very specific and unique sound. And this album kind of matches that with what Sanchez said was kind of the perfect example of the combination between servitude and the all-powerful, with kind of the dog being the servitude and the god kind of being the all-powerful. And yeah, the themes that you kind of mentioned and me mentioning about her boyfriend was almost with intention, where the being told what to do by a dude is kind of a theme that kind of sits in there. The combination of the woman's expectation to kind of follow and abide in both like a derogatory and the altruistic kind of sense of it was the angle that they were going for with it. And I think it does a pretty tasteful way of doing that. We'll go into the details. But before we dive into the track by track here, do you guys have any input onto how you felt just before you dove into the album?
I mean, I'd never heard of them before, so this is my first experience with them. My thoughts, I was really excited going in. I wasn't quite sure what was going on for a little bit. Having now the context, a lot more of it makes a lot more sense to me. And I think it's wild that this is their first, like, post-COVID thing that they're doing. Like, that feels like it was so long ago, even though, like, in the grand scheme of things, it was, like, basically yesterday, but that's a long time. 3
albums over the course of 14 years is pretty large gaps. Obviously, the biggest gap being that first 6 years where they were just touring, just performing with other artists, just opening for bands, just kind of being we make money on live gigs, that's what we do, and never actually recording anything, to now this being kind of their third piece that's a long career to have without having actually pressed anything yet. And I thought that was kind of a unique spot for them as well. Mel?
Yeah, so I also never heard of them before, so I was excited. I love like women, so I was
I support women's rights and wrongs, okay?
Exactly. I was like, I'm so here for that. And this album made me feel really cool just for listening to it. But
Yeah.
it gave me
I
like
could see that.
I think I'm cooler now vibe.
That's dope. That is honestly, like, a lot of people don't necessarily like call garage one of their like go-to genres. I've been a big fan of garage since I've heard a lot of like old classic rock bands that do like garage style albums. They were pretty big in the 90s, where you would just have a band who would just try it out. Metallica was specifically one that like stood out to me. Garage Inc. was a album that I grew up with, and I didn't get to know what I would say probably better Metallica until well after I kind of knew a lot about Garage Inc. It just was the way that I ended up kind of learning about them to begin with, and just really, really cool tracks. And I'm a big fan of Garage. I like how aggressive it is. This album, like I said, we'll get into it, not quite as aggressive as something like that, for sure.
What caught me the most off guard was seeing it was a garage band, like very different than what I anticipated.
For sure. Absolutely. We're going to get right into it, though. Starts off with the track Icicle, which opens up with this really cool guitar lick, but we've got a little clip here, so let me just throw that in, and let's give it a spin. Yeah. Opening track. A lot more kind of modern alt-rocky than I had anticipated. It's got these really wet guitars that almost give it kind of like a surfy vibe. It is still very LA. And I think that was kind of something that to take away from it is it still feels very LA rock scene in that kind of sense. I felt like a lot of the Cure kind of vibes in this, where it's these kind of upbeat tempos, heavy filtering on everything, but like still sort of the dark connotation kind of chilling out behind it the whole time. I thought I personally, I liked this. I like the minimalism of it in the same breath with everything. I was a fan kind of right off the hop with this being the opening track.
Yeah, for me, this was a really cool intro, like overall. I mean, I love the guitar. It feels almost very like simple, but yet there's a lot that's kind of going on to like draw your attention. And it has like this almost vibe, like you're hearing this from like a room over, sort of like almost filter of the sound. And I thought that was a really fun way to kind of like introduce into this like whole album. I probably, like, maybe it's a weird take, I really like this. This might be one of my favorites off the album because it's just such a cool stylistic like choice.
Wow. Yeah, so for me, like an overall comment, I think on most of the tracks would be like, what you were saying about the simplicity. I loved how her like vocals gave this like haunting vibe, but the instrumentals like actually I thought enhanced it a lot for me throughout. I don't know if it was a synth in the outro. I was a big fan of the outro. And this song didn't make any fucking sense to me until I got through a first full lesson and then going back to it, because I was like, an icicle like representing this like purity and like reflection was an interesting take, because I was like, they melt. Like, it is purity and self-reflection, like fleeting. What are you trying to say here? I wasn't understanding it. And yeah, I also didn't realize just how toxic this was gonna get. And so like the line, like all the shadows I didn't want you to see, like I didn't pick up on the fact that like she's like very aware of how toxic this is gonna get. And yeah, I don't know. It was
so good.
And you completely miss it. Like I didn't get it. It went over my head. And then yeah, listening back, I was like, oh shit. she warned us. Yeah. Like, okay. But yeah, I thought it was a great opening.
Yeah, 100%. No, I was a big fan. I think it says, like, again, it says a lot without having to say too much at the same time. I think it kind of does a right balance with it. It's still fun. It's neat. And like I said, right off the hop, I was a fan. I was in. I appreciated it a lot. This plays into "Kiss Me Deep," which we'll let the clip play first on this one. We'll comment on it after we hear some. So obviously very post-punky. It's got these really hypnotic drums with these really kind of timeless like guitar riffs over top of it. Very psyche. Like it's got a lot of psych influence into it. You can tell that psych guitar like comes through huge on it. I thought the vocals on the first two tracks were really important for just kind of conveying the message specifically. There's not a whole lot of chaos or anything like that going on. It's really just kind of, this is the music playing, this is the message that we're delivering with it, and really wanted to like kind of focus in on that for the first two tracks. And I kind of find that tends to happen a little bit further past it. This is just when I noted it kind of specifically was on the second track, saying the message is very clear. It's they're with all of the distortions that are involved in the instrumentation of it. The vocals still seem to really stand out. They're not trying to over-filter the vocals at all. They really want the message to be very clear and the rest of it to kind of feel backgrounded. And I did like that layering, that ability to kind of create a little bit more dimension that way of somebody's talking right now, listen up to the musicality. And again, a very psychedelic kind of background to it. It really creates a nice sort of, I picture like an acid trip backdrop to the track,
yeah.
You know, right?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
There's two comments that I had like written down in my notes. The first was like it makes this like really hazy feel that the vocals just cut through, and it's like almost kind of jarring just how like diametrically opposed they kind of are in that effect, because it's so clear and so like present compared to everything you've got going on in the back. I said it reminds me of like something you'd hear in a hookah room. And then I said my second comment, and this feels a little too on the nose now that we've got the context that I didn't have before, but I said it reminds me of the Scott Pilgrim scene of the evil ex who's in the band, and they're like there in like the whole like I'm singing to you about you sort of a deal. I felt like overall I enjoyed it a little less just because it was a little unsettling and I wasn't really sure what was going on. It was still kind of going against my expectations of a garage band. I think with the context, re-listening to it, I think I'm going to like it a lot more than I did the first time. But like it definitely has a very unique kind of stylistic approach to it in this.
Yeah, I thought there was such like an interesting dichotomy happening. Like, you loved me like a precious dog, you licked me like a hungry dog was such a wild line to me that really stood out. And I thought the instrumental break was so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, that's great.
100%. But then we pop into 777. This is kind of the first time that it really started to feel a lot more garage to myself. This is where it kind of broke up. I agree that Kiss Me Deep wasn't necessarily, like, it wasn't my favorite. I liked Icicle a lot more. But then 777 comes in, and now we kind of start to get a little bit more of that garage kind of feel to it, which we're going to listen to right now.
The way she says demise,
So good.
loved that so
I had to
much.
go back the first time I listened because I was like, I gotta catch that again.
I loved it so much. Oh,
It was so good.
oh. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just liked that at this point we're really like kind of not ramping up the pace, but like the goth tones that this started to take like made me really, really happy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was such a nice like feel after the first two tracks. Like I really liked it. It felt a lot more driving, and like there's almost like this frantic energy where at times it almost felt like it's spiraling out of control a little bit, which is really interesting. But
Yeah.
God, it was so good. And the fucking like I think it's towards the end, like there's an organ on the tracking and like in that background, and that is so cool to me. Like I loved that.
You know, for this, again, it's still very LA rock, which I can appreciate. Like, it really does still sit to its roots. In case you guys are wondering, the reason that they named it LA Witch was they wanted to just be called Witch, but Witch was already taken, but they were all from LA, so they just threw LA in front of it.
Honestly,
but they are from LA, so, but it still has that really kind of surfy, that really kind of wet sound with the way that they distort everything that I personally will always really appreciate. Like, it's always gonna have a little bit of a draw on me. I'm an indie alt rock kind of fan, and the wet guitars are just I like them. Yeah, I'll always
saying
like them.
a noise
so
is wet makes me uncomfy though. But
It's
I
a
get what you're
specific
saying.
thing.
I know,
It's a
but yeah.
specific thing. It is a real, like, you want to make it more wet sometimes, depending on what you're doing. But this was the garage that I was waiting for, so like I did really like it. But they also kept those psyche themes kind of throughout all of it, which I thought was really nice. Has this cool balance of being a really catchy rhythm and beat, but with these distortions to give you this kind of unique texture with it. It's not just a catchy, pop rock, modern alt rock kind of jam. It still has these creepy kind of themes that are trying to still poke their head in, that I thought was really cool. I like the chimey breakdown in the middle of it. I thought that was just fun. I never hate a little chime.
A little chime.
Little chime. I actually typed in chimney. I'm just like, what is a chimney breakdown? But that's just me not typing things properly. And then, like, again, it's really simple in its delivery, and it still has that really goth kind of styling to it. That it works really properly together. I was also a really big fan of this, and I liked upping the tempo a little bit. It's one of those things where in episode 3 on the podcast, we actually covered Squid Cowards, and between Kiss Me Deep and then 777, where I felt like this really fell into that same kind of idea that Squid was, where it's deconstructed, talking about the story, but like slowly becoming more and more manic. And I kind of appreciated that, where it's slowly starting to get a little bit more aggressive and up tempo, and you're starting to feel the movements as you kind of go through them, which I liked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then we pop into I Hunt You Pray. A little bass action for everybody here. So something I specifically wanted to pull out. Obviously, you've got this really heavy bass line that's kind of penetrating through. We've lost the tempo again. The tempo has slowed all the way down, mostly kind of by the bass. They have that little switch up of the drums midway through that kind of adds maybe a little bit of extra dimension, but I kind of this is a 6-minute song and it burns. Like it is a burn kind of the whole way through, because you're waiting for it to kind of build up to a point and it never really cracks into there, which gives this almost anxiety, this anxious feeling. Because I noticed, and I played specifically the clip with that drum breakup where it switches up that drum a little bit, because I was like, oh, maybe we're about to get it, and then it sits on that new drum line for another. That was in that was in the first 2 minutes of the song. That change up happens, and then you realize, okay, the change up already happened. This is what we're gonna get now for the next 4 minutes. And it's like it's really I appreciated it for what it was. I was hoping for a little bit more tempo personally on this track. After they gave me a little bit of the garage, I'm like, hey, can we pick it up a little bit? And they're like, for 6 minutes, they were like, no. And I was like, all right, cool.
They had you fiending.
Yeah. They were like, dope. The end of the track, though, the outro with that super cathedral
the buzzing
sound
it led into too was
with
crazy.
It was really cool. And again,
crazy.
it felt like kind of that dog to God throughout the whole track. And it just showed God for like a couple of moments at the very end with the way that it did that outro. And I thought that was a really cool aesthetic of, being the dog, being like the servient dog throughout the whole track for 5 minutes and then getting 45 seconds of God part. And I was like, this is cool. I really appreciated that kind of aspect to it. Again, not necessarily my favorite track, probably not one I'm going to go back to often, but I thought it served its purpose for the message that they were kind of trying to put out on this.
Yeah, my notes, I put, like, this track really solidified that, like, they had this very kind of, like, Americana noir vibe going through this whole album. And I really enjoy it. It was again, not quite what I was anticipating when you got such this, like spiraling, almost manic-y end in 777.
Yeah.
To then hit this just felt very eerie and kind of unsettling, which for a song like I Hunt You Pray, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, and you also kind of get that DOGGOD, that play on words here with pray in particular.
Well, hunt and pray,
was really kind of neat. It just kept leaving me like the way it made me feel was like how you want to feel like in those like little horror movie thrillers that have like this little like sequence of like a chase or something, and just unsettled was really the biggest thing. I honestly, it felt a little long because there are so many fake outs and it doesn't feel like you build to anything. And the only other note I put was that it feels sort of like it could be classic, but I really feel like it needs to build to something in the next song on the album, because otherwise it's just too long. Yeah.
No, I fully don't disagree with you. I also, the one thing that I do like about you mentioned the title, I Hunt You Pray, is really kind of, this is where she draws the line and says, I am the dog in this, I hunt. You pray being spelt with an A for those of you that aren't specifically looking at the track listing while you're listening.
No, I thought it was spelled.
It's
spelled with an E. It's spelled with an E.
Yeah.
Then I spelt it wrong on my notes.
Which is interesting because it's like
exactly.
you pray on her, but there's also the praying dynamic with like AY.
Exactly.
Like it's so interesting.
So sick.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm dumb and I typed it in wrong. I thought that was a lot cooler than I thought it was, but it turns out you guys think that's cool anyway. So.
No, I think
it's even cooler because of that. Because it gives you the element of that God and like, you know, this God power, this divine power being able to be for good or evil, and you're using it to literally prey upon me. Like very interesting to me.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought that was so sick. I also thought that maybe this could have been a turning point. Like, I hunt, you pray. So maybe she's taking the power back and she's the hunter while he's literally putting, like, she wants to put her fate in her own hands at this point. Like, he can pray to the divine, she's gonna hunt. But again, it could go either way.
It keeps happening over and over and over. There's like that shift in that dynamic almost kind of happening. Yeah, I thought that was so cool. I thought the guitar was really nice. It was like the most prominent I think it's been so far. And I thought they did a really good job of just invoking multiple senses. Like, I know you can't like you can't like taste or like you know, smell music, but like the story kind of crafting to give you those senses back was really well done. Like, they're talking about the smell of blood and like you know it has that like metallic-y. I thought it was so sick. And you were talking about the outro, and the leading into that buzzing drove me nuts. And I thought that was so well done. Yeah, 100%. And then we pop into Eyes of Love, which, well, listen.
So a lot more conventional rock kind of style on this one. It's still very raw. It's really untapped, but I thought it worked really well with the vocals on this specifically, kind of also being really raw. Her vocals are really interesting because they're not fantastic, but they do seem purposeful, and I do think that does work pretty like solidly with this. I specifically had that whole guitar solo because I thought that psych rock solo was just dope. I was here for it. I was for sure enjoying it. It is a little bit more post-punky, kind of closer to the end of it, but for this wasn't my favorite track. It was good. I feel like Mel is probably going to tell me about like a part of the story that it covers that I maybe missed out on and probably own that a little bit more, because I'm sure it probably is a little bit more narrative, which is why it wasn't necessarily so much for me. But we'll let her tell me about that. But
I did write down some of, like, this song had some of my favorite lines. Like, I loved "A crown of thorns heavy in armor, deconsecrate your beauty and power." I thought was sick. And then "Every step I take, I chance a hidden mine. I'll either strike gold or I'll blow my mind." I loved that one. I also thought it was very interesting how, I guess her vocals have been pretty consistent throughout, but this one even more so. She sounded more distant to me, but even clearer, which made no sense. Like, it was very haunting, and it kind of just gave a different vibe, but I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I put that it was very dreamy. I noted, I did really like how they mixed the vocals here. I thought it gave this really interesting kind of quality to the whole piece that kept me really captivated. Because about now, my other note was like, as far as like how we've laid this out on the album, to me, it's a lot of really slowed down kind of rocky tones, which is fine, but at this point, you know, we're 5 songs deep and only one of them has had like a little something up tempo, and I'm starting to really kind of crave that. But I did like the guitar bit in the middle. I loved the way that some of these lyrics, like what you brought up specifically, is what I had down for like how you weave in like these divine elements, that dog and the god, especially in this. I put like, I'm really waiting for it to kind of like, for something to hit. I'm waiting for that culmination that we still haven't gotten after I Hunt You Pray.
for sure. Well, if you wanted something up-tempo, luckily, then we pop into what I think is probably the punkiest track on the album, and my personal favorite, The Lines.
Yeah.
I for sure must, like, I rocked out with this one the hardest out of all of them. It's like the fact that it switches so much throughout, even just the solo, the way that it switches through keys and just continues to just, I thought I loved it. We have an organ solo. I've told you guys how much I like organ solos before. I love a good organ solo, so we got a little organ solo in there. I appreciated that. It was kind of, this track felt like kind of a crossover from the very nostalgic sounds to a much more modern rock kind of approach to it, and I liked that a lot. The tempo change up still fit in really well with everything, so I thought that they masterfully kind of found a way to, we're gonna up the tempo again, especially after Eyes of Love, that did just kind of feel really slow as a rock song, to pick it right back up. I think they did a good job of transitioning into it. I was a big fan.
Yeah, for me, I really enjoyed the intro. It was a very nice change of pace. It was giving me finally what I was like looking for and yearning for at this point. And like this interplay between all the different layers on the track where you're moving through all these different kind of like melodic structures, you're kind of passing it around and kind of like almost playing with each other was really fun for me. Honestly, overall, I said it feels like this captivating, dreamy like song that really almost dares you to not be drawn in, because every time that you have a moment where you might be kind of like losing interest for a second, something new happens to kind of pull you back. And especially right now in like this album, it was very needed, and I really liked the placement.
Yeah,
the whole, like, it's the way you described it makes it seem like it's giving like a siren song, which is interesting leading into the next song. But I loved the chaotic energy shift. I thought it was very, very needed. I love a guitar, so yeah, that made me really happy. And I thought Trace the Lines was such a an original and cool way to like kind of call somebody like a follower. Like I thought that was just really well done.
Yeah, 100%. And then we kind of actually get like a full change up moving into Lost at the Sea, which Lost at the Sea organically, is it Lost at the Sea or Lost at Sea?
Lost at Sea.
Why did I have Lost at the Sea?
Dude, I mess up my notes all the time, man.
This is what happens when I don't handwrite them. Guys, I switched over to typing them. Apparently, typing is not better. I handwrite my notes because this kind of thing happens. But either way, this is a much more acoustic, unfiltered, unadulterated sound, and so it kind of just changes over. We're going to give it a little bit of a listen.
The slow unveiling the true colors of your flag, and now I see that I'm free, lost at sea.
Thoughts?
I hated that we transitioned into this. It felt like slamming on the brakes again, and it honestly, the way I wrote it was, it feels like you're edging me, and I'm really mad at you about it. I was so excited that we were finally picking things back up. I was really invested, and then you just fucking threw me off, and I don't know if I would have liked the placement somewhere else better, or if I just needed some more of what we had going in the lines. I said it gives me as though you're trying to do a dreamy like Stevie Nicks-esque cover by Dolly Parton, but it's all a cover of beach music, and like it can't, like I was real mad when we slammed on the brakes, okay? Like I carried that energy through. like all of it, like it felt like such a disservice to the album for this to be what followed. And maybe I'll feel differently about it with the context that I've now got about everything with her like boyfriend and all of this, but like I was not the biggest fan of this one.
I thought it was pretty. I thought
fair.
No, I thought it was pretty. It was very, very gentle in comparison, but I thought the ending was like so beautiful and like poetic. Like I loved the I'm free, lost at sea. Like in order to feel free, you had to get yourself lost is such a wild concept. Yeah, but it was a huge energy shift. Like it did pump the brakes, but I didn't mind it.
From the music side of things, I mean, this like turned to almost like a reggae feel to it, like very sublimey type guitars. I know people are gonna rip me up for saying reggae. I understand it's not reggae, but no, it had that very like southern LA ska rock sound. Like honestly, it does, and I was kind of here for it. Obviously, it being at sea and that kind of thing, and honestly, this kind of plays. Weirdly enough, I feel like this plays really well with SOS at the very end of the album, which if you didn't like this part, you probably won't like SOS too, because I hear, again, with just kind of like that more kind of island influence that kind of popped up out of nowhere. I get Lost at the Sea being part of it. They're LA based band, which southern SoCal rock is going to have a specific sound to it. They've already been playing around with a lot of really wet guitars and that kind of stuff too. Like, it's already kind of there. I personally like ska and I like Sublime, so I was like, I'm kind of still here for this. This is totally fine. The change of pace is okay if it's still super groovy like this, and I love the groove on this track. I'm a big fan. I was like,
there's just too much slow happening on this album. Like, every time that we build up, it just slams on the brakes for me.
But slow and groovy is very different from slow and like post-punk Bernie. And I think that this was
wrong.
This was a lot groovier. It had that funk to it, and I was like, I can still get down with this if this is the direction that we're going to turn around and go now. Does it feel like it maybe works in the context of the whole album? I can understand that being a negative to it. But for me, I was like, this is, as a single, this might be one of my favorite songs on the album. As a standalone single. Like,
I could see that more.
Outside of context, I actually can appreciate this a little bit more. I know that the story side of things is something that I don't focus well enough on. I'll be the first one to admit it. So out of context, this could also lyrically make zero sense at all. But just as a standalone song, I can play this on my deck at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, or like during the summer, like already making myself a way too early Caesar / Canadian Bloody Mary, because you guys don't know what a Caesar is. But you know, I was a big fan. I like this. I'm cool with it. I was vibing with it.
See, my biggest gripe is, like, narratively it fits here on the album, but sonically I almost wish that, like, they had swapped this and Love. I don't know. I don't like the placement of it, and it really just tainted, in context of the album, the whole experience for me. And like, maybe out on its own, like, I'll appreciate it more than I did originally, but I don't know. It just didn't hit for me.
Well, they heard your requests, Rose, because then we pop right back into, again, another way punkier track right off the top. Let's get DOGGOD, the title track.
I appreciate how, if you didn't understand what was happening in the story, she spelt it right out for you on this track. So there's no letting it go over your head. I also thought it was giving Death Do Us Part in, like, the craziest way. Like, a hang me on a leash till I wait for my release. Like, what? And then we had that like, really unsettling outro again that, like, freaked my brain out, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, overall, I finally wrote, in all caps, thank you. Overall, it's a solid tune. You know, for me, it almost felt a little too late, except for narratively, lyrically, those strong, like, pictures that it's painting really felt like a good culmination of this story that they've been telling. It's not my top tune on the album, but it's definitely up there.
Yeah. No. That's completely fair enough. I thought I like the fact that it was like punky right off the top, but also it had these really angry kind of guitar licks with a really, really quiet drum line kind of behind it, which I thought was really cool. When everything else has been really bass and drum heavy when it comes to how it's setting up the atmosphere, this one was like, we're angry now. The guitar is going to take the forefront, start yelling at us, and the drums were like, and the drums and the bass line were like, we're going to take the kind of the back seat a little bit on this track. I appreciated, and I appreciated that kind of switch up going through. I was doing a little bit of research. This is actually a lot closer to a lot of their earlier work. So this is probably what a lot of the people who are coming to LA Witch are most likely looking for. It being the title track kind of makes a lot of sense in that side of things, because this really matches up a lot more with their goth kind of aesthetic and links kind of their goth aesthetic to the message that they were really trying to get out there. And then just the breakdown like really kind of took it into that real garage vibe, even though it's still so much lighter than any other garage vibe I think I'm regularly used to myself. Right before that solo, I appreciated it a lot. It was a good track. It, again, also not my favorite. It was kind of a middle of the board, but it was upbeat. It had some tempo to it. It was, and just a really solid way of bridging, I think, an older audience to what their new sound is, or what this album is, and kind of bridging the gap between, again, what their brand is over to what this album is as well. I thought it kind of did both, and being on the title track, I think, was a good way to do that for the album.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agree.
And then last but not least, I actually meant to grab a clip for this one, but I didn't, because that was on me too. Because again, I'm typing instead of handwriting everything. Handwriting things I can't screw up. Typing ruined everything for me. But regardless, it closes out with SOS. SOS really wasn't my favorite track, personally, of the album. But I don't think you could end it on DOGGOD. So you needed to put something there, and SOS... It sounds like they were about to jump into like an 80s pop song for a second, and then it jumps into these kind of like the Police style like refrains and its instrumentation. Like all I could think of was the Police, which funny enough also has a song called SOS, which also uses a lot of reggae influence. So that's why I said like Lost at Sea kind of tied in with it, because I'm like, obviously they took some sort of inspiration, I think, from somewhere.
See, I said my note was it reminds me a little too much of New Order.
Okay.
Like there was a little bit too much of that for me. And I did appreciate the callback to Lost at Sea, which felt like it pulled that in a little more for me in the album.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't what I felt like I needed. Like obviously you don't end on DOGGOD, right? But yeah. I don't know that this is what I would end on.
It's a little bit of a mess. Maybe that's kind of where you're seeing a little bit more New Order. Like it is a little bit more of a mess, and that doesn't really fit the rest of the album, because everything else does feel very specific, and the message is delivered to be clear. It was all
very intentional, and then this just felt a little out of place.
Agreed. 100% with you on that. And like, again, it's just not my favorite track, but you can't end it on DOGGOD.
No.
You can't. Mel, what was your take on SOS?
Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't the most satisfying ending, I think. I thought the iceberg was interesting. I was kind of like, is that why we used Icicle in the beginning? Are they trying to go full circle with that? I thought that was, I don't know, interesting, but yet also dragged in like Lost at Sea again. But it was just like okay to me. I don't know. Yeah, I felt like I was missing something from it.
Forgettable.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I don't think that's the note that you want to end an album on.
Yeah,
at the end
exactly.
of the album, you either want to feel like you need to return to the start, or you really want to feel very like satisfied. And this just kind of fell a little flat.
I just had a tough time really kind of picturing in my head how else you end it.
Yeah.
Because the styling of the whole album, none of those really ever felt like a conclusion. And that was one thing that kind of ended up going there. And in my own conclusion, I actually mentioned that, which means that we went through all the tracks, and now we get to hear our conclusions. So if you guys want to let me know, what were your conclusions on the album?
Narratively, for me, I like the story. I like that it felt a little incomplete at the end. But from like a sonic perspective, it just didn't hit quite like I needed it to. There was a little bit too much of the same slower tempo. I needed more of the upbeat, I feel like, throughout. Even if it's just in moments or in like the different transitions, some of them felt a little harsh because of those tempo shifts. I said, ultimately, overall, I'm giving it a 6.4. It felt almost really good, but it's just missing something to kind of tip it over that edge.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I really enjoyed like the wordplay throughout. It made me really, really happy. the slow parts didn't bother me as much, but the only part I was disappointed in really was the outro. But then maybe they don't want to give us that resolution because like she's maybe still just stuck in that cycle, like she hasn't broken out of it, kind of a thing. But I still gave it an 8 too. I really liked it. Like I said, I felt cool listening to it. I was like, I like their vibe. Like I want to hang out with them. They seem cool. But yeah, I'm not a professional, obviously. Sure. I go off vibes.
Listen, I can respect the vibes, you know? I'm not going to begrudge you vibes.
Yeah.
Like,
all in all, like, honestly, I enjoyed the album. It was missing the punch that I was looking for, like, and would expect from a garage band, especially. Like, when I read garage, I was hoping for almost to get punched in the face too much. I was okay with this not punching me in the face the whole album all the way through, but I was expecting at least like a couple of punches. I still think it did what it intended to do, which was the message that it was trying to get across. I think they did a fine job of like translating some vintage sounds to like a little bit more of a modern theme. Even though at times like it was a bit too much of a slow burn, it does have its moments where it does start to get a little bit exciting. But I really wish there was like one or two moments of them actually kind of punching back, especially given the topics that they're talking about. Yeah. They're talking about bad ex being controlling, and like I really wanted to like hear that kind of rage fight back at some points in the album, and I just never really got those.
A dog wouldn't fight back
very well. But instead, it's just kind of sitting there and letting the frustration of the situation like sit in the atmosphere of
and
it.
And it feels like she ends in this dog energy versus like the God energy I was really craving for her to finally like step into in the songs and on the album.
Yeah.
Agree.
No, so for me, I gave this one a 7.4. I was kind of right in between. I still... You really hated Lost at Sea, and I was still with Lost at Sea.
I want so badly for there to be transitions and stuff, and like narratively, I can't begrudge it. They do an excellent job narratively, which is why it feels like harsh for me to rate it as low as I did. But it's sonically, it's missing that one thing to throw it like up to an 8 and be great.
I agree. You know? I still with you. That's why I couldn't quite put it into the 8s, because you're right. I wanted a couple more hits in the face. After all of this slow burning, I want that dog to bite back.
Mm-hmm. I was looking for my feminine rage moment, and I didn't quite get it. And it left me really a little disappointed, but I like what they did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And honestly, I'm still curious to find out more about LA Witch moving forward, in my opinion. But yeah, that wraps up DOGGOD by LA Witch. If you guys have comments, please make sure you tell us. Are we right? Are we wrong? Are we going to care? Or do you guys care if we're right or wrong? We'll find out if you guys... The only way we can find out is if you guys tell us. So please make sure you leave in the comments what your guys' thoughts are. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
3, 2, 1.